All right, we're live. I think we're live. Woohoo! This is my first ever live. Thank you to Roxy for having me on. This is awesome. I've never been on Instagram Live before, YouTube Live. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me as I just get my bearings here. I'm looking at the interface. It's very cool. And yeah, as I'm chit-chatting away, I would love for you guys, anyone who hops on, to ask some questions. I think up in the corner here it says we have three people on. So hey, there we go. That's where the messages are coming in. Awesome. All right. So I'm just gonna pour myself a cup of coffee here and get started. I'm currently in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm on the west coast of Vancouver Island, which is an island off the west coast of Canada. And I know that those of you in the UK who probably make up most of Roxy's audience, this is the evening for you. So thanks for joining in. I hope everyone's doing well. I know that the UK has been battling with the pandemic a fair bit, so I hope things are all right over there, over in quarantine. It's definitely a difficult time. I've been spending most of my time here in this bedroom. This is my bedroom, and it's also my office for the time being anyways. So I'm a documentary filmmaker. Hey, Roxy's audience. So I'm a documentary filmmaker. Roxy and I actually met back a few years ago through a mutual project that we were both a part of called One Species, which was a brand that was all about endangered species. And that's initially actually how I started working on this documentary film that I'm currently working on, which is about endangered orcas here in the Pacific Northwest. So the film I've been working on, acting as the co-director, producer. I'm also a character in the film, a whole array of different things, as I founded it with a friend of mine 3 years ago now. So it's called Coextinction. Hey, thanks, Roxy. Stoked to be here. Hopefully I'm all right on this live. It's still so new, and I'm just watching myself chatting. So, but it's very cool. So thanks for having me on. But yeah, so just diving right into it, Roxy sent me a few questions that I could answer. And then, like I said, anyone who has some questions, feel free to ask. I am a documentary filmmaker and a conservationist. And the film that I'm currently working on is called Coextinction. It's a documentary film about endangered orcas, as I was saying before. So there's a population of orcas here called the southern resident killer whales. Resident essentially means that they are local to this greater area, which is called the Salish Sea. So they come quite close to shore, and they're a species of orca that only eats fish. And they are currently, essentially, very unfortunately, starving to death because the fish population, which is mostly salmon, here is what they eat, the fish population is in significant decline. So the southern resident killer whales are only at 72 left. That's only 72 individuals left. And actually, and speaking with the top scientists that have been studying these orcas, which are the most studied marine mammals in the entire world, their belief is that there's only one breeding male left and perhaps two possible breeding females. So they're really at the brink of functional extinction. And again, this is because the salmon population that they feed on are also in significant decline here in the Pacific Northwest. And salmon populations around the world have taken huge dives because of the impact that, surprise, surprise, we are having on the ecosystems around us. So this film called Coextinction explores that relationship between the orca and the salmon, two keystone species, and especially the salmon being like the lifeblood of the Pacific Northwest. And we look at the relationship between the two, but also look at why are the salmon going extinct? So how are we connected to this greater connected puzzle? It's about the interconnectedness of life, And it's a pretty adventurous, exciting, thrilling on-the-ground documentary. Myself and my teammates from around the world came together, and we traveled across the Pacific Northwest to speak with experts as well as go and see what was happening with some of the major issues on the ground. So, for example, we look at the Trans Mountain Pipeline, so we look at big oil, we look at fish farms here on the West Coast. I know those of you over in the UK and Scotland, anyone in Norway, a lot of European countries have had issues with fish farms. We're also having serious issues with fish farms right now, polluting our waters and increasing the salmon declines. We also go look at the Snake River dams. So there's these massive dams that exist in Washington, and we go down on the ground to see how they're working, how they're inhibiting salmon passage. And we've run some really big campaigns on the ground, big protests. Actually, we just had a huge protest in Washington State in the US, which was a 22-day pilgrimage walk. It was a 22-day protest where we walked from the main city in Oregon, the neighboring state, Portland, all the way to the Ice Harbor Dam. So it was like a wake up and walk, and then you camp. And then there's with rallies throughout, but on the start of the march and then at the end. So it was this really big protest, and the idea was to put pressure on the decision makers, the policy makers, to get a bunch of attention and noise on these Snake River dams, which are inhibiting salmon passage, which are decreasing salmon populations, which are then in turn means that our orca population doesn't have enough salmon to eat, amongst many other species, because as I said before, everything is interconnected. So we've been running some big campaigns like that. That one particular protest that we had, unfortunately, had to be canceled due to COVID-19. We were in the middle of the march, and then we had people from around the world. A lot of Europeans actually were there. We had people come and join this march, and unfortunately, they had to go home the next day. It was pretty crazy. We were living in certainly an unprecedented time. Yeah, so that's what I'm working on right now. Feel free to ask any questions, and I'm gonna just pull up some of Roxy's questions here so I can make sure I'm getting everything covered. The lighting's a little bit bright here, eh? Maybe I'll close this window. That might be better. Oh yeah, that's much better. It's glaring in my face before. All right. So I give you a bit of my background. So I'm working on this documentary film called Coextinction. You can go and check it out if you're interested at all at Coextinction Film on Instagram, Facebook, the whole show, Twitter, if you're into that. And we also have a website, coextinctionfilm.com. Check out what we're doing. We've also got a YouTube channel as well. There's not too much up there right now, but there will be in the future. Yeah, and stay tuned. We're looking to do a fall release for that film. But besides the fall release, 2020, we've got tons and tons of campaigns and educational work that we're doing, whether it be speaking at schools or like that big campaign that I noted on before that you can participate in, which are really grassroots and really exciting and very relevant to the issues that we're seeing right now in the Pacific Northwest that are very poignant and very, very urgent. So we need as much help as we can get. In terms of how I got into wildlife filmmaking, it's a great question because I think a lot of you guys watching might be interested in wildlife filmmaking, wildlife conservation. We share a lot in common. I have always loved wildlife as a little kid. And my dad worked at a zoo, actually, which I know zoos are controversial, but it was an amazing intro for me to learn about wildlife and to fall in love with the wild world. But like a lot of young people, I kind of had a tangential path to this documentary filmmaking and conservation world that I am now participant to. I left high school thinking, you know, I had to go to the most, uh, do the most difficult program at the most difficult university, and you know, I needed to do like a real program or whatever. So I think a lot of young people kind of get sucked into this trap of thinking they should be doing something rather than just going with their heart or their gut. So I studied engineering, and I got into business, and I was really in the business world. And it was a tough time in university, and I wasn't, and then even after university, I wasn't really doing what I felt I should be doing. And yeah, and I had been working on this clothing company, clothing brand, which was One Species, which is the clothing brand that I mentioned earlier. That's how Roxy and I met, through this brand that I had started up. And we were creating collections of clothing after specific endangered species. We had the manatee on the roster, the Antillean manatee down in Belize, as well as the as a spider monkey species, also down in Belize. We had the southern resident killer whale. And I just wasn't really connecting with the business side of the work in the selling of the clothing. And it was kind of ironic in the end. And I think this is a whole other pathway we could go down. But, you know, selling clothing and trying to make a positive environmental impact, but inevitably having a footprint due to the clothing that I was selling. I was participating in this consumer world that we're so in right now. So I ended up reeling back on the clothing, and then an opportunity arose to work on a film about the southern resident killer whales, the orcas. And pretty much it was like me and my documentary partner, my co-director Gloria, we just like met in a coffee shop, dreamed up the idea, and then we raised a bunch of money, built a team, went out and did it. And it's 3 years later and we're working on it, and I'm very much in love with this work, and very much intend to continue working in the wildlife filmmaking space, where I believe I can have the greatest impact and I feel the most fulfilled in the work that I do. So Roxy has a question: what made you choose orcas as a species to film about? Yeah, so solid question. Okay, if you got orcas are an amazing species. They are incredible. They're so intelligent. They're so empathetic. They're all around the world, actually, so you can find them no matter where you are. But then there's different species in each area, which each have their own language, their own diet, their own set of characteristics, and they don't interact. They don't interbreed. So orcas are fascinating. So that was one of the reasons why, of course, I wanted to make a film on orcas. It was in my backyard as well. Being Canadian, there's a species that's critically endangered in my backyard. And so that was another pull. And yeah, but the funny thing is, and I think it's important to note, is that with One Species, when I was deciding, because right, the orcas kind of were pulled in from that original clothing company, that brand. The orcas were arbitrarily chosen. Honestly, I had some friends working on the company with me at the time, and we just Googled. We were like, cool endangered animal. And we thought, oh, people love orcas. And it's so funny to think back then, because not only was I so disconnected from the issue and what was going on the ground, which was fair. I mean, that's how we all start out. But I just had no idea where that decision was going to take me, and how much I would know about orcas now, and living out, you know, in the westernmost point right on the ocean in Canada. So it's amazing how much it completely transformed my life path, and I'm very, very grateful to it. So, how dangerous is it to be a wildlife photographer? Well, it depends on what you're photographing. I wouldn't quite define myself as a wildlife photographer, though I have done a bunch of wildlife photography work over the past year and a half, 2 years. And I was filming and photographing some pretty dangerous animals in Africa this past summer, where I was Yeah, it was kind of some of the stuff I was doing was a bit sketchy because I was working with conservationists right on the front line. So, for example, one night I was in Mozambique and we were relocating a bunch of lions that we were relocating a bunch of lions, and two of the lions were man-eating lions, and one of them hadn't been darted properly and gotten away. So we were doing all the veterinary stuff, and I was photographing and whatnot as this one man-eating lion was. That's a whole other story for another time, but it really depends on what you're photographing. But for the most part, of course, it's not really that dangerous. You just have to be smart. Like, don't, throw yourself in front of an aggressive animal. But yeah, like I said, I'm not too much of a wildlife photographer at this time. And the interesting thing with the orcas is, because they're so critically endangered, there's laws about how close you can go to them, and it's very hard to film them because they're so rare, and then you can't even get that close to them. So we filmed the other species of orcas in the area, but orcas, there's never been a known case of a orca killing a human in the wild. In captivity, yes, but in the wild, no. So it's really not too dangerous to be filming orcas unless you can get in the water with them, and then they can be unpredictable, but still no known cases. All right, so that's my path into wildlife filmmaking. Hopefully not too long-winded, but I'm a bit of a wacky brain person, so I tend to go on tangents. Hopefully it's interesting. Again, feel free to ask questions. So how I took the plunge into making my own film. I gave you the background on how it all happened, and I didn't talk to you so much about the details of how it happened, I suppose. So, making a film is no small endeavor. It's like you can make a small short film and you can do it all yourself with your iPhone, and I think that's still a film. But if we're talking about the traditional concept of a film, something you would watch on Netflix, or even say a sponsored film by a big company like Patagonia or something, or whatever mountain work warehouse, like on that you would watch on YouTube. Yeah, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of creative thought, and it's a lot of planning, preparation, and also it's this huge puzzle because you have this, especially documentary films, you have all of this information and you have to distill it and you have to piece it together in a way that's compelling for the audience to, so you can get your ideas across, so you can move your audience and inspire them. If you just deliver information, of course, people are going to just get bored, especially with the short attention spans that we have today. So I've been working on this for 3 years. This is what the trajectory has looked like, just to give you an example. And this is the film that I've been working on. Every film's different, but they are significant endeavors. We've been fundraising since the beginning, but that was pretty much the first step, was building a bit of a team, going out and fundraising. And fundraising is really hard because you need a lot of money oftentimes to get all of the equipment and to get the permits to go and shoot and to feed your entire team and all of the travel involved with the production. And then in the post-production aftermath as well, that hours and hours and hours in editing and puzzling and storyboarding and getting composers to come on, and color designers and sound designers. So there's a lot that goes into it. And so you do need money to pay everyone and cover all the costs. So yeah, so we raised a bunch of money. We had a lot of success with grants. We had a lot of success with a Kickstarter. We had a big Kickstarter. We've also had private donors. We've had success with private donors. So that's been great. Very grateful for all of that. And in each instance, we were very much, we had our goal and we figured out how to have a successful Kickstarter. It took us a few months to build. We launched it and we managed to raise, I think the Kickstarter was like just over 50K or something like that. So it was pretty good. And then, yeah, so raising money, the building of the team, our team is not paid all of the time. So oftentimes it's a volunteer team. Sometimes people are paid, sometimes not. So it's, yeah, that's tricky in itself. So building out a team and finding talent, as well as just being a good leader in the team. And then that whole post-production editing process is what we're currently in right now. So as I said, hours and hours of puzzling and coming up with tying the themes through and coming up with exciting storylines, and also then being able to distribute your film afterwards. So selling it to, say, a big distributor like Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, or deciding that you're going to make it publicly available, and there's so many different pathways to launching a film as well as creating one. But yeah, they certainly are they take usually years. They're kind of like running a business in a way as well, but a lot more fun. Because you have the different stages. So you get to go out and shoot, and then you have the post-production and whatnot. For advice for anyone who wants to go out and make their own film, I mean, I just gave you a bit of kind of the behind the scenes there as to what it takes. So I would say just go and do it, because the scale at which you can create a film can really, really, really vary, right? Like, even if you don't have the tools and it's just you can go out and shoot on your phone. There's very basic editing softwares out there, and you don't need the most fancy equipment and whatnot or the best like shooters and everything to be able to tell a really, really beautiful story that really moves people. So it depends on your goal. That might be a good place to start, I guess, is what is your ultimate goal? And I think that, especially seeing how far we've come as a team, having never been in filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, or especially wildlife documentary filmmaking prior to this, seeing how much we've learned, how much we've grown, how much we've raised, how much work we've put in, and how far we've come. It's really been amazing, going from essentially no experience and no presence in this industry to now being much more established and having a really beautiful product that we're excited to share, that we hope is going to make a really big, truly global impact. I think that you have the capacity to dream big if you want to. Just know that it's going to take a lot of work, that you have to build a team. You can't do it by yourself, and that you do need to raise money. But you can go ahead and make it all yourself as well. So have that goal in mind, and don't limit yourself in terms of possibilities. I think each aspect of the filmmaking process, there's someone you can call to ask about how it's done. You can do research. You can find people, as long as you can get people to believe in the cause, believe in your film and your story. I think you'll find what you need to make it happen. Okay, Roxy's last question that she has is, I've already talked a fair bit about the film, so it's about the film, but why is it so important to tell this story? I think that's a great last question, potentially, to end on. And then, of course, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to ask them away in the live chat there. So why is it important to tell the story of Coextinction? A story about orcas, about salmon, about the interconnectedness of all life in the Pacific Northwest, but not just the Pacific Northwest, and the whole world. I think that the human race is finally ready to hear this story, to understand that, your impact it doesn't just impact if you put pesticides, if you're a farmer and you put pesticides on your field, it doesn't just impact the insects that you're looking to kill. It enters our rivers, in our water systems, and then it enters our oceans. It goes into our air, and we all end up. So everything's interconnected. These systems are ecosystems are so deeply intertwined and interconnected. We can't even comprehend it. And I think that that's at the basis of understanding conservation. It's like we've barely scratched the surface in understanding how understanding the ripple-like effects of our impacts on this planet, our footprints. Say, for example, with the climate crisis, scientists are scrambling to predict what is going to happen in the coming years, but it's just such a complex, interconnected system that we can't really know. And that is the basis for conservation as a theory, that you be conservative in your decisions because you know that your impact is going to have lasting effects. And so I hope this film will bring to light that we're not just in the midst of an extinction crisis where we're seeing, individual species drop off the map, just disappear, like, the white rhino's gone, Sumatran elephants gone. Those species are so connected to so many other species that we're going to see the disappearance of it's the co-extinction, and we're part of it. It's the global collapse of biodiversity. The term co-extinction is actually a scientific term, which means the decline or disappearance of a species leading to the decline or disappearance of other species that depend on it, which leads to cascading effects across the trophic levels of the ecosystem. So that's really the core theme of the film. And we use the example, you could say, of the orcas and the salmon and our connection to the salmon. The orcas are kind of like, if you've ever heard the saying, the canary in the coal mine. They're the indicator species. They're telling us that this ecosystem is in dire trouble and that we have to pay attention. And so that's the core theme. Also, and I think it's a poignant story for the time that we're in right now. I think that we're, as I was saying before, we're ready to start to grasp this. We're starting to understand, for example, that what we put in our bodies, the food that we eat, actually affects our health. It's like, it seems, kind of obvious, but the greater public, I think, has been slow to get this, because we're so quick to medicate the situation. We're so quick to put a Band-Aid to deal with the aftermath. If you have a big, if you have a big oil spill, we've got things set up for the cleanup, but the transition to the greener, cleaner economy, energy economy is what we really need to be doing, going to the root and the source and working with our natural systems rather than attacking them and having to deal with the consequences. So it's some big picture kind of thinking there with the film and the story. And of course, we want to try and save the southern resident killer whales from extinction. So it's about the orcas and having people fall in love with these orcas. And they're really at the tipping point of their survival. So we need significant drastic action to happen and bringing salmon populations back. So we focus on, as I said before, major issues in the film that the audience can be galvanized on to try and help save these orcas as well as the salmon. Some things that will make a really big impact of all of the different issues that they face. And also, I guess the third component would really be we're starting a conversation about our tend to lean towards economic values over environmental values, because in every situation that we look at throughout the film, we see that it's been a focus on big industry and the allowance of big industry to continue their unethical or environmental practices that have caused the biggest negative consequences and impacts. So, and the irony is also with a lot of these lean to industry practices, we see that actually they're not more beneficial in the long run for the economy. So, for example, with the Snake River dams, they're actually losing money every year and costing taxpayers like hundreds of millions of dollars just to upkeep, and they're barely providing any energy for Washington State. So the question is, why are they still standing? And there's a lot of bureaucracy around that and a lot of old beliefs being held. And that's the problem. So looking at the environment as a worthy investment for the survival of species around us, for our own survival, and for the health of our economy as well. So those are the 3 conversations that we have: coextinction, saving endangered orcas, and economy versus environment discussion. And those are the 3 important messages that we want to tell in this story. And it's a big part of everything that we're working on and doing, and I think can be replicated around the world in your own backyards. You can see, you know, the same kind of story of coextinction playing out. And that's the very interesting thing about this story. So whether you're in the UK or you're in Canada or you're in Australia, I feel like you'll be able to really connect with this story. So that's it for me. Stay tuned, fall 2020. Hopefully I didn't chat too long there. Didn't even drink my coffee. Yeah, but it was great to be on the live. Thank you so much, Roxy, for having me here. It's awesome. I really appreciate it, and stoked to see how this whole live, having people on for the lives goes. I'll make sure to tune into some in the future. So thank you so much, and I think I'm gonna log out now. Bye, everyone. Any last questions? I think I'll just wait to see if there's any questions from the 6 people that are on. I see you there. I see you, 6 people. Also, I don't know if you noticed, I'm just gonna say, I've got some weird rash right here. This is not, it's not like makeup or anything. I think it's from I've been doing a lot of surfing here because we're right on the ocean, and I think somehow irritated my face recently. What initiative should we take to save nature and animals? I would say start with what's in your own backyard. That's the most important thing. It's funny because that story about individual impact, that whole message that's like, your voice matters and what you do matters, I feel like it's gotten a bit old and stale in a way, and people are not resonating with it so much anymore. But it is the truest possible thing because we are all connected, right? So you are an individual part that is not separate from the parts around you. You are, you know, an integral element to your family, to your community, to the ecosystems around you. And so the actions that you partake in really do have effects on the environment and everything around you. And that could just be as simple as your attitude. So we're talking really small picture here to help the bigger picture. Because if you inspire one person, right, in your immediate circle to help protect nature and animals, right, which is your goal, then that person could go on and inspire another person, and so on and so forth. That person could work on a film or a really important conservation project, or be a policymaker in the future. Who knows, right? I think take it as far as you want to go, but don't feel like you're not doing enough, right? Just focus on the fact that every little bit counts. That would be my best advice on that. Hopefully it was helpful, Santosh. All right. Any other questions? I'm gonna have one more slow sip of my coffee. Okay, well, thanks so much, guys. Hopefully see you over on the Coextinction channels, at Coextinction Film, and you can check my personal channels out at elena.jean. And soon I will also be starting up One Species as well, kind of a similar thing to what Roxy is doing. Actually, it'd be awesome to have you on, Roxy, but just doing some interviews with wildlife filmmakers and conservationists and thought leaders. So that'll be fun. So go check out those channels. Thanks so much for having me on, and peace and love, and hope to see you guys again soon.